The anniversary was just around the corner, 1 year together, 1 year of laughs, inside jokes, memories that felt irreplaceable. I had already planned everything: the surprise getaway, the dinner reservation, the little touches to make the weekend unforgettable. A cozy cabin near the beach, a private fire pit, a bottle of wine, just the two of us away from the world. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait for the day to arrive, and for her to be just as excited as I was. But recently, things had started to feel different. Slowly at first, like a creeping unease that made me question whether I was overthinking things. The little signs, subtle changes that I tried to dismiss. It started with her disappearing more often, those late-night texts and calls that seemed to take her attention away from me. She was always busy, always caught up in something. Work, friends, whatever she said, to avoid explaining why we didn't have much time together anymore. It was never like this. We had been inseparable. But lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I trusted her. I had to. We had been together for almost a year, just one more month until our anniversary. And I had no reason not to, but I couldn't help but notice how her demeanor shifted. She wasn't as affectionate as she used to be. When I'd reach out, she'd pull away. Sometimes when I asked how her day went, she'd give me half-hearted answers. And when I'd hold her or kiss her, there was this wall I couldn't get past. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Relationships take work, I told myself. There's bound to be a little distance now and then. But my gut wasn't buying it. The more I tried to ignore it, the more my instinct screamed at me to pay attention. Something was off. The tipping point came that Friday night. We had planned to meet for dinner, maybe talk about our upcoming trip, but when I tried calling her, her phone went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her. She always picked up. When I texted, it took an hour for her to respond, and even then, it was vague. I'm caught up. I'll be free soon. But as the night dragged on, I started to feel a knot tightening in my stomach. Something didn't sit right. She never missed our dinner plans. I let it slide, tried to stay calm, but I couldn't. A text from one of my friends came through, a bartender at the place we often went to. The message hit me like a cold punch to the gut. Saw her name with Jake tonight. Thought you were meeting up? Jake, her friend from college, a guy I had never trusted. He always seemed too close to her, too familiar. Sure, he was always hanging around, but I never liked the way he flirted with her, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she seemed to enjoy his attention more than I thought was appropriate. I wasn't the jealous type, but with Jake, it felt different. He was always in her space, always there when I wasn't. I felt my blood run cold as I stared at the message. I tried to push it aside. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they were just hanging out. But why would she be with him and not with me? We had plans. She knew how much I was looking forward to it. I tried calling her again. No answer. By this time, frustration was building inside me. The doubt, the insecurity, the anger, it all started to bubble up. I didn't know what to believe. Was she really just busy, or was something else going on? She finally texted me back an hour later with a half-assed excuse. Sorry, I fell asleep, just resting, not with Jake, everything's fine. But there was something off about the message, the timing, the way she avoided answering the one question that mattered. Was she with Jake, or wasn't she? I didn't know what to think. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that nothing was happening, but my gut was telling me otherwise. There was no way I could ignore it now. The next morning, I woke up in a foul mood. I had a feeling deep down that the anniversary trip I had been planning, something I had poured my heart into, was about to be ruined. I wanted to talk to her, to clear the air, but I didn't know how. What could I say? How could I confront her without sounding paranoid or accusatory? I spent the morning pacing around my apartment, thinking about the last few days. Everything that seemed normal was now clouded with doubt. I couldn't remember the last time we'd shared an intimate moment, the last time she'd looked at me the way she used to. It was as if something was missing between us, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I couldn't sit around any longer. I had to see her. I needed answers. I didn't want to imagine what she was doing, but I couldn't help it. The picture in my mind, her with Jake, laughing, touching, doing things that should have been reserved for us, tore me apart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. I texted her, asking if we could talk. She said she'd be home soon. I waited, and as time passed, I felt that familiar sense of dread growing stronger. My thoughts were racing. How was I going to react? What would I say when I confronted her? What if I was wrong? But there was no way I could ignore what my gut was telling me. She had lied to me before, and I had forgiven her, but this felt different. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I had to know the truth. The wait felt endless. Every minute stretched longer than the last, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I had no idea how I was going to handle whatever came next, but the anxiety gnawed at me. What if she denied it? What if she turned it all around on me, made me look like the bad guy? What if I was wrong? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't wrong. I had seen the signs, felt the distance, and now the gut punch from my friend's message. She had been with Jake. I didn't care if it sounded crazy or irrational. My mind was made up. I wasn't going to let her make a fool of me. If I had to confront her, I would. If I had to tear down the wall she'd put up, I'd do it. I wasn't going to be the one left in the dark, waiting for answers that might never come. When she finally walked in, I didn't know what to say. I had rehearsed a dozen different lines in my head, but nothing seemed right. The moment we locked eyes, I could see the guilt in her face before she even spoke. As she had this way of looking at me when she was hiding something, like she was trying to pretend everything was fine, but her eyes betrayed her. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "Sorry I'm late." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, my heart pounding. She could probably feel the tension in the air, but she didn't know the half of it. All I wanted was the truth. I didn't care about excuses or apologies or anything else. I wanted to know what had really happened. "Where were you last night?" I asked, my voice calm but edged with something I couldn't quite contain. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape. But she knew she couldn't avoid this, not this time. "I told you, I was just resting," she said, her voice strained. "I'm sorry if I worried you, but I was just really tired." I didn't buy it. She was avoiding the real question, and that was enough. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her lies. "You weren't with Jake?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. Her face shifted for just a split second. Her eyes flickered, and her lips tightened like she was trying to control her response. It was so subtle, but I saw it. I caught her. She swallowed hard. "No, I wasn't with him. I told you I was just hanging out with some friends." That was it. I couldn't take it any more. My anger flared up like an uncontrollable fire. I had been trying to keep my cool, but the more she lied, the more the rage inside me built. I stood up, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was shouting at her. "You think I'm stupid?" My voice cracked, and I could feel my fist balling up by my sides. "I know what's going on, okay? You've been distant for weeks, and now you're lying to my face. You've been with him, haven't you? You've been seeing him behind my back." She took a step back, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. I could see the panic in her. Maybe she didn't expect me to react this way. Maybe she thought I would just let it slide like I always did, but not this time. This time, I was done. "Don't deny it," I yelled. "I saw the message. My friend saw you with him last night. You think I didn't know? You think I wouldn't figure it out?" She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but the words never came. She closed it again, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes started to water, and for a brief second, I almost felt bad. But then the anger took over again. I wasn't going to let her off the hook, not after everything. I grabbed my phone off the counter and shoved it in her face. "Read this. This is your friend Jake, isn't it? The one you've been hanging out with behind my back?" Her eyes widened as she glanced at the screen. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. Her lips parted as she read the text. She seemed to shrink back, like the weight of the situation was finally sinking in. She was caught. There was no way out now. I wanted her to say something, to at least try to explain herself, but she just stood there, silent. "Say something," I demanded, my voice rising again. "Why did you do this? What the hell is wrong with you?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a second. Then something changed in her eyes. A mixture of regret, guilt, and something else. Fear, maybe, flashed across her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Hurt me? You think a sorry is going to fix this?" She looked down at the floor, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to tell you." I didn't care about her excuses anymore. Every word she said just made it worse. The betrayal, the lies, it all hit me like a freight train. I couldn't look at her anymore, couldn't listen to her. The one person I trusted most had broken me, and no apology would ever change that. I turned away from her, running a hand through my hair, as I tried to calm down, but it didn't help. The anger didn't subside. It just simmered beneath the surface, a bubbling mess of frustration and confusion. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of that apartment before I said something I'd regret. I didn't even know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there, not with her. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and slammed the door behind me. I could hear her calling my name, her voice breaking, but I didn't look back. I didn't care. I didn't know where I was going. My mind was a haze of anger, confusion, and disbelief. I couldn't think straight. I didn't want to think straight. I just needed to get away from her, from everything. The apartment felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me with every breath I took. I ended up at a bar I used to frequent, the one where I went to unwind after long weeks of work. I didn't even know why I went there, but I needed something to drown out the chaos in my head. I walked in, not bothering to acknowledge anyone, and ordered the strongest drink they had. The bartender gave me a concerned look, but I didn't care. I downed the shot, the burn in my throat, a welcome distraction from the fire in my chest. I sat there for a while, nursing my drink, trying to calm down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from her, and my stomach sank when I saw it. "Where are you? Please talk to me. I'm so sorry. We need to fix this." I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to reply. I wanted to say something, anything, to make the rage that was building inside me subside. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The words wouldn't come. How could she think a simple apology would fix everything? How could she think that after everything, I would just forgive her? I took another drink, my thoughts spinning. I thought about the time we had spent together, all the good moments, the late-night talks, the plans we'd made. The way she used to look at me with that soft smile, the way she made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now it was all shattered. I wasn't the type of person to jump to conclusions, to accuse someone without reason. I never would have imagined she could betray me like this, but she did. She chose him. She chose Jake, her friend. The guy I always knew was too close for comfort, and now everything felt like a lie. All those sweet words, the promises she made, the future she painted for us. None of it meant anything anymore. I could feel the bitterness rising in my throat, and the thought of her with Jake, of them laughing and touching each other, of her betraying me in that way, was enough to make my stomach churn. How could she do that to me? How could she throw everything away so easily? Was I that easy to forget? Was I that disposable? I stayed at the bar for a few more hours, not really talking to anyone, just drowning my thoughts in alcohol. The world felt numb. I didn't want to go back to that apartment, didn't want to face her, didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. But I also couldn't just ignore what happened. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine, not anymore. Eventually, I left the bar, stumbling a little from the alcohol. My mind was foggy, my thoughts still clouded with anger, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going back to her, not now, not like this. I didn't care about our anniversary, didn't care about the plans we'd made. That didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't let her just walk back into my life like nothing had happened. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to take control. I had to make sure she understood that this wasn't something she could just apologize for and move on from. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The next few days were a blur. I stayed away from the apartment, didn't respond to her texts or calls. She kept messaging me, apologizing, begging me to talk to her, but I didn't want to hear it. Every time I saw her name pop up on my phone, it just made me angry all over again. I couldn't bring myself to reply. I started avoiding mutual friends, too. I didn't want to hear their sympathy, didn't want to listen to anyone tell me that everything would be okay, that it was just a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. She had made a choice. She had chosen to cheat, and no amount of "I'm sorries" could change that. Days turned into a week, and still, I didn't hear from her in person. She respected my space, probably out of fear, but I could tell she was struggling too. The guilt was eating her alive, and I could see it in the way she looked at me when I passed by her at the store, in the few texts she sent me asking if I was okay, but I didn't care. I didn't care about her guilt. She had done this to herself. It wasn't until the following weekend that I ran into her again. I had gone to the grocery store, hoping to get in and out without having to deal with anyone. But as I turned down the aisle, I saw her standing there, looking just as lost and broken as I felt. She was staring at the shelves, but I knew she was waiting for me to say something. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the fear. I walked past her without saying a word, not because I didn't want to confront her, but because I knew that there was nothing left to say. The moment we had shared, the life we'd built together, it was all gone. It was dead. And I couldn't bring myself to resurrect it. She called my name softly, but I kept walking. I wasn't going to let her chase me anymore. I wasn't going to let her think she could just come back into my life after everything that happened. When I finally made it to the checkout, she was still standing by the aisle, her eyes following me. I could feel the weight of her gaze, but I didn't turn around. I was done with her. I didn't even know what I was going to do next. Maybe I'd move out. Maybe I'd just cut her off completely and try to forget she ever existed. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to let her back in. She had destroyed everything I thought we had, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. The truth was, I didn't know how to move on from this. I didn't know how to forget her, how to forget what she had done. But one thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time, not after everything. It was a Thursday night. We'd been married for just over 3 years, and everything seemed to be on track. The anniversary was coming up, but there was a coldness between us I couldn't ignore. Emma had been distant for weeks. It wasn't huge, just small things, shorter conversations, less intimacy. I chalked it up to stress, work, the usual stuff. But a knot was tightening in my stomach. Something felt off. I had just returned home late from the office. Emma's car was parked outside, the lights in the apartment still on. She wasn't in the living room. I checked the bedroom next, but she wasn't there either. That's when I heard it. Voices. Quiet laughter, muffled sounds coming from the hallway. My heart sank. I moved down the hallway, closer to the sound. The closer I got, the more familiar one of the voices sounded. It was Tomo, my childhood friend, the one who had been like a brother to me. He'd stayed with us a few times, always a welcomed guest. But tonight, something felt wrong. I stood at the door, hesitating for a moment. What was going on? I took a deep breath and pushed it open. There they were, Emma and Tomo, tangled together on the bed. Emma's hand was in his hair, her face flushed, her eyes closed in pleasure. Tomo's hand was on her thigh, his lips kissing her neck. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. The world around me seemed to slow down, the air thick with disbelief. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stared, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Emma had always been the one person I trusted completely. And Tomo? He had been my brother, the one guy I thought would never betray me, but there they were, together. What the hell? The words came out like a growl, rough and raw. Emma froze, her eyes wide as she looked at me, her body stiffening in an instant. I couldn't process the shock, the anger, the crushing betrayal. My heart raced as I looked at Tomo, who was now sitting up, his eyes wide in panic. He looked guilty. Hell, they both did. But it wasn't enough. "Are you serious?" I muttered, my voice barely recognizable. The hurt was like a flood now, rising inside me, choking me. "How could you? How could both of you do this to me?" Emma scrambled to cover herself with the blanket. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered. "It was just a mistake. A mistake." My laugh was dark and bitter. "A mistake. You're in my bed, Emma, with him." Tomo stood up awkwardly, looking like he wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. "Look, man, I never wanted this to happen. It was a mistake." He stuttered, his voice weak. "A mistake?" The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "A mistake? You don't just make a mistake like that, Tomo. This isn't some accident. You've crossed a line you can't come back from." Emma's eyes were filled with tears now, but they didn't move me. How could they? How could I forgive her? How could I forgive him? "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words felt hollow. There was no weight to them, no substance. I took a step back, my mind racing, trying to process everything. It felt like the floor was falling out from under me. "I'm done," I said. The words came out cold, final. "Get out, both of you, now." I don't even remember what happened after I told them to leave. The next few hours felt like a blur, a mess of chaotic emotions that I couldn't even begin to make sense of. I didn't yell again, didn't shout, didn't make a scene. I just told them to leave. It felt like I was trying to put distance between me and the madness. But even when they were gone, the pain didn't stop. It followed me around, sinking into my bones, filling the silence that had swallowed my apartment. I wasn't even sure how I managed to get to bed that night. The whole place felt like it was closing in on me. The bed, her side, was cold. Her absence was louder than her presence ever was. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I had just discovered. I kept seeing her face, her soft eyes, her smile. How could she look at me like that? How could she lie to me for months? It didn't make sense. I thought I knew her. I thought we had something real. But that night, that wasn't real. Nothing about that moment was real. The phone buzzed. I didn't even check the number, but I knew it was Emma. She had been trying to reach me non-stop. Her messages were flooding in, her desperate apologies, the guilt in her words. But I didn't want to hear it. Not yet, maybe not ever. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was nothing she could say that would make me feel better, nothing she could say to take back what she had done. But she wasn't giving up that easily. At around 2 a.m., my phone rang again. I sighed, letting it ring out until it stopped. Then, seconds later, another call. This time, I answered. "Please, just talk to me." Emma's voice was trembling, shaky. She was crying. I could hear it. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen like this. I didn't want to hurt you. It was a mistake. I swear to you." I felt a wave of nausea. A mistake, I snapped, my voice low and full of venom. That's what you call it, a mistake. I know it's hard to understand, she said, her voice small, but I need you to listen. No, I interrupted, my words cutting through the silence. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to just say it's a mistake. You cheated on me, Emma, with him, my best friend, my brother. You think you can just apologize and we can forget it? She was silent for a long moment. Then I heard a soft sob on the other end. I never meant for it to happen, she whispered, barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why the hell did it happen? I almost shouted, but I didn't. I kept my voice steady, even though it felt like I was being pulled apart at the seams. Why him, Emma? Why Tomo? Why not anyone else? Why my best friend? I don't know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was confused. We were drinking and I don't know how it happened. It just did. Stop, I said, my voice sharp. Don't try to make excuses for it. I don't want to hear it. I'm so sorry, she repeated, over and over, like it was some kind of mantra, a desperate attempt to fix what couldn't be fixed. I let the silence stretch between us, my mind reeling with the information I had just been handed. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to forgive this, but part of me, deep down, didn't want to forgive her. I was angry, I was furious, and I didn't care if she was crying or if she was sorry. This wasn't a moment that could be swept under the rug with a few tears and words of regret. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I finally said. My voice was cold, distant, like it wasn't even mine anymore. And I don't think I want to. You destroyed everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her sniffling, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. Please, she begged. Please don't do this. I love you. I always have. I'm not in love with him. It was a mistake. I swear I don't care, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I don't care if you love me. You crossed a line you can't come back from. You hurt me. You hurt us. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. I knew that wasn't the end of it. She'd keep calling. She'd keep apologizing. But I wasn't sure if I was ever going to be able to listen. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. Everything had changed, and nothing felt the same anymore. The apartment felt foreign, like I was walking through someone else's home. There were so many reminders of Emma, the pictures on the walls, the half-empty coffee mugs on the kitchen counter. Every little detail seemed like a cruel joke. How could I have been so blind? How had I not seen this coming? I didn't hear from her for a while after that night. No calls, no texts. At first, I thought I'd done the right thing, cutting her off. But then came the silence, the emptiness that consumed me. I thought it would be a relief, but it wasn't. It felt like I was drowning in it. Tomo, however, wasn't done with me. He called. At first I didn't pick up, but eventually curiosity got the best of me. I picked up on the fourth call. Man, please just hear me out. Tomo's voice came through the phone, urgent and broken. I didn't speak. I couldn't. What was there to say? What was there to explain? I fucked up, he continued, his voice cracking. I know it was wrong. I know I should have never done it. I can't change it, but I need you to understand. I didn't mean for it to happen. She came to me and I just... Shut up, I snapped, my chest tightening. I didn't want to hear it. His excuses didn't matter. You don't get to apologize for this. You don't get to tell me how you didn't mean for it to happen. You've known me for years. You know exactly what she means to me, and you did it anyway. He fell silent for a moment, and I could almost hear him struggling to find the right words. But there were no right words. Nothing could fix what he'd done. I'm sorry, man, he said quietly. I'll leave. I'll stay away. I can't undo what happened, but I don't want to lose you as a friend. I've known you too long. I let out a bitter laugh. Friend? I repeated the word like it was something alien. You think you can still be my friend after what you've done? After what she's done? Tomo didn't respond. He didn't have to. There was nothing left to say. I ended the call and sank into the couch, staring at the empty space around me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But mostly I just wanted to disappear. The days stretched on, each one harder than the last. I tried to fill the void with work, with distractions, with anything that would keep my mind off what had happened. But it was impossible. The pain lingered in every corner of my life. It followed me around like a shadow I couldn't escape. I finally decided to pack up some of Emma's things. I had to. I couldn't keep looking at them. The photographs, the little notes she had left me, the things that used to make me smile, now felt like reminders of my own humiliation. I didn't want to touch them, didn't want to look at anything that would remind me of the woman who had so easily betrayed me. When I opened the closet, I found her jacket hanging there. I couldn't bring myself to touch it at first, but eventually I grabbed it, my hands trembling. It felt too light, too empty. As I packed up her things, I noticed that the space she had left was somehow bigger than I expected. Her absence was louder than anything she had ever left behind. I couldn't believe this was my reality. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had it all gone so wrong? Later that week, I got a message. It was from Emma. She had sent a long text, apologizing again, asking to meet. I didn't respond, but then she called, and I knew, deep down, that she would keep calling, keep pushing, keep begging for my forgiveness. But I didn't want to forgive her. I didn't want to hear her say she was sorry again. I didn't want her explanations. I didn't want her excuses. I wanted the woman I had married back, and I wasn't sure if she was still in there. I wasn't sure if she had ever been real.